LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 17th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's lucky 13 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use, media criticism, and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy source for tonight's show will be last night's Saturday Night Live, including the tree trimming cold open with Alec Baldwin playing Donald Trump, and some of, you'll see a Kellyanne Conway impression, a Mike Pence impression, a Sarah Huckabee Sanders impression in there, and I think even a really brief Omarosa impression at the end of the clip that I picked out for you that I'll start off the show with. Then there'll also be a weekend update clip, both on the main topic about how Trump is basically trashing, tanking, dooming the Republican Party through the ongoing Russia scandal, the possibility he may fire Robert Mueller, the obstruction of justice, and then also his problems that were evident with the election of Doug Jones in Alabama. Roy Moore lost. Yay! That was the big topic last week, and I guess Alabama decided not to elect an alleged pedophile. They voted for a Democrat instead. That's progress in the American South, I guess, and you'll see when I get to the news clips, those were the two best news summaries from NBC and ABC. Will both talk about Alabama, and they'll talk about the Robert Mueller the firing scandal, or not. He's not going to be fired, or hopefully won't be fired, but there are rumors that Donald Trump is planning on firing the special counsel Robert Mueller next Friday, December 22nd. I don't know where I heard that was something that Representative Jackie Spear said on a show earlier in the week. And anyway, I'll address all that, but like I said, and then at the end I'll have a few clips on the tax bill that the Republican Congress seems poised to pass Monday and Tuesday. The House and Senate look like they're going to vote on this conference bill. I talked about a little bit last week, but I'll have a few clips at the end to talk about the substance, the tax bill, but the real narrative that most of the media, the mainstream media at least, has been pushing is that Donald Trump is splitting the Republican Party, both through his obstruction of justice possible through the Mueller investigation, and then with his divisive rhetoric and his endorsement of Roy Moore, and that you'll see kind of shows up in the Saturday Night Live clip that I'm going to start off the show. It's a little, you can see the entire Saturday Night Live video on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel. I'll link this down in the video description. I've also put a link down there to my clip list of my lucky 13 clips. If you can understand my notes, you can check those out down there. If you're watching this as a recorded show, you'll see the two topics down there with time indexes, plus a time index to look to the bonus Sandy clip there. I did take a short 8-second video of Sandy rushing to lie down before the beginning of the show, and she seemed to be in quite a hurry. So you'll see coming in the door and lying down all within 8 seconds. Do you think Sandy can do it in 8 seconds? Well, you'll find that out later in the show. But first, here is the Saturday Night Live cold open clip. Alec Baldwin as Donald Trump, dealing with several problems involving Robert Mueller and the Russia investigation that I will discuss with you after we watch that 2-minute and 18-second clip together over here.
It's Christmas time soon. White Santa will be coming from house to house, taking presents from Muslims and illegals and giving them to American children. And in the Christmas spirit, I wanted to thank all the amazing people who work for me. But because I can't help myself, we're going to also remember all the haters and losers I destroyed this year, and we're going to hang ornaments with their faces on what we're calling the Tree of Shame. Okay? Kellyanne.
Merry Christmas, Mr. President. And can I just say that you actually do look amazing?
God, you're so good at lying, Kellyanne. Now, who do you want to put on the loser tree?
Okay, and so actually I did choose disgraced FBI Director James Comey.
That's right. Sadly, I had to fire Comey because he's a nut job, and also because he knew all my secrets. So I had to pull a little obstruction A of Ustus J. Thank you, Kellyanne. What would you like to have for Christmas?
I want out.
Look who else is here. Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Merry Christmas.
Oh, Merry Christmas, Mr. President. And for my ornaments, I brought Sean Spicer and Anthony Scaramucci, whose mangled corpses I stepped over to get this job.
Thank you, sir. It's so impressive the way you defend all the nutrageous things I say and do every day.
Well, hey, sir, you shoot a gun at the floor and I'll dance.
That's my girl.
Mr. President.
Well, if it isn't my fall, Mike Pence.
Right. Merry Christmas, Mr. President. I hope I'm not slurring my speech. I had a ginger ale.
It's okay. It's okay. Are you here to deck the halls, Mike?
Oh, I don't like that song because it mentions gay apparel. Which I'm pretty sure is a mesh tank top. The ornament I brought is that traitorous Mike Flynn. Because he lied to us, Mr. President, and he acted alone, without our knowledge.
Oh, totally.
Oh, Donald, you heard that noise out on the lawn?
Could it be Santa? Or the rapture?
Or even worse, it's Omarosa.
And Leslie Jones does a really good Omarosa, and she does it again on Weekend Update, but that's not really on my topic, the Omarosa firing. But you did see a couple of the really important issues that could end the Trump presidency early and even have the really long shot chance of putting a Democrat in the White House. That's right, Democrat in the White House, I said, and I will explain that to you in just a minute. First, you saw the Kellyanne Conway clip there where she had the James Comey ornament for the Christmas tree of shame, and Donald Trump talking about obstruction A of Justice J. That's firing James Comey, obstruction of justice. I have several links down in the video description that explain how obstruction of justice fits in this situation, including a report from the Congressional Research Service from 2014, giving you all sorts of, it's like over 60 pages if I recall, and gives you long descriptions of ways that different statutes have been used to charge people with obstruction of justice, and that may become very, very important in the next couple of years. And then at the end, you saw Mike Pence talking about how Michael Flynn he's going up on the Christmas tree of shame because he lied to us, to all of us, or whatever it was, and we knew nothing about it. It's like, because that's Mike Pence apparently knew that Mike Flynn had these conversations with the Russians. When you remember from my Sunday clip roundups, he went on the Sunday shows and he basically said Mike Flynn had no conversations with the Russians about sanctions. And then it turns out that our vice president did know about that, and why that's important, why it does have the long shot option of putting a Democrat in the White House. This is the left wing dream scenario where 2018 Democrats retake the House, possibly the Senate. 2019 they begin impeachment and removal proceedings against Trump and Mike Pence because he's somehow involved in this whole obstruction of justice treachery. So and I have very few facts to back that up. That's why this is a dream scenario. This is a fantasy, not based on actual facts in terms of Mike Pence, although the obstruction of justice charges against Donald Trump seem to have much stronger evidence, maybe not decisive, dispositive evidence, but in terms of Mike Pence, if there were such evidence, then a Democratic House and possibly Senate impeach and remove Trump and Pence. And who's third in line for the presidency? Well, the Democratic Speaker of the House, because remember the Democrats took over the House in 2018, or in 2019 we now have the Democratic Speaker of the House. Could it be Democrat Nancy Pelosi from San Francisco? But Nancy Pelosi becomes the first woman president. Wouldn't that be the most bizarre outcome? Anyway, that's all based on that last Saturday Night Live clip. And I have one more Saturday Night Live clip for you here. This is from the Weekend Update, where they talk about the senators who have called on Donald Trump to resign, trying to shame him into resigning. And I've actually, if you remember during the campaign, I said Donald Trump's superpower is that he is incapable of being embarrassed or being shamed, no matter, if he's if he is contradicting himself at the end of the sentence about what he said at the beginning of the sentence. No shame. He almost had shame when the Access Hollywood tape came out, but anyway, this is about Donald Trump's lack of shame, at least from Colin Jost. And then there's some good Michael Che jokes, and Colin Jost and Michael Che actually just became co-head writers of Saturday Night Live, along with two other guys whose names I didn't really recognize because they're not, they don't appear on the show. They're just writers. But I guess they have 4 head writers on Saturday Night Live, and Colin Jost and Michael Che are among those two, among the 4 head writers. And here are some of their good jokes on how Donald Trump has no shame and we shouldn't call for him to resign over here.
9 senators this week have called on President Trump to resign from office over the allegations of sexual assault. The problem is, you're never going to shame President Grabass out of office. Shame for Trump is like spinach for Popeye. It only makes him stronger. Especially with inappropriate sex stuff, because he's already openly bragged about it. He didn't go on Howard Stern 37 times to talk about real estate. All I'm saying is, it's hard to assassinate a guy's character when his character already committed suicide 40 years ago.
I actually think President Trump should at least consider resigning. I mean, you've made your point already, dude. The political system is broken and probably rigged. And any idiot that understands television could mobilize the angriest people in the country with lies and insults and still somehow be more likable than Hillary Clinton. Point taken. We've learned our lesson. What else is there? If this was a Christmas movie, this would be the part where you winked at the camera and disappeared, and then we realized that you lived inside of us the whole time.
So, yeah, there you have it. The first, I talked about the Colin Jost jokes before. I showed it about how Donald Trump's superpower, and that's kind of the Popeye spinach thing, is that he is incapable of being shamed. And then Michael Che there, I mean, you can tell me what you think. I thought that was kind of funny, but that's the 2 political comedy clips I want to show you for this week. And now I want to move on to the actual news clips from the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. The first 2 big news summaries I'm going to show you are from NBC and ABC. I thought they both had good news summaries. I think ABC was a little bit better on the whole Mueller. Well, they both talked about the possibility of a wave. I think NBC spent a lot more time on this whole Scott Jones comparison, which is a pretty good comparison. Not Scott Jones, sorry. Scott Brown. Scott Jones is the sheriff in my county. And so anyway, Scott Brown is the guy who was elected senator from a Republican senator elected from Massachusetts, kind of like which is a very Democratic state. Just like a Democrat has been elected from Alabama, a very Republican state. It's the Obama versus Trump, but I think the comparison kind of breaks down. But it's a fairly good news summary, and it's a little over 4 minutes long. I'll talk about it with you after we watch it together over here.
If you have the sense that history may be repeating itself, you're not alone. Back in 2010, there was a president with sinking approval ratings, an unpopular piece of legislation, Obamacare, supported by just one party. And a Republican, Scott Brown, won a Senate race in Cobalt Blue, Massachusetts, suggesting a huge Republican wave was coming. Well, it was. Republicans won 63 House seats in 2010 and 6 Senate seats. Today, we have a president with sinking approval ratings, an unpopular piece of legislation, the tax bill, supported by just one party, and a Democrat, Doug Jones, won a Senate race in Ruby Red, Alabama. Democrats are hoping to catch a wave and sit on top of the political world. And our brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll suggests that the surf's up. When asked who they would prefer to control Congress, 50% said Democrats, just 39% said Republicans. You have to understand, our poll doesn't show this very often, this kind of spread. It was the first time the Democrats have been at 50 in our poll with a double-digit lead since September 2008. Before the Obama-led Democratic wave of that year. The enthusiasm is all with the Democrats as well. 59% of Democrats tell us that they have a high level of interest in next year's elections, compared to just 49% for Republicans. As for President Trump, his approval rating stands at 41% in our poll versus 56% who say they disapprove of his performance. That's actually slightly better for him than 2 months ago when the results were 38-58. Still, That 41% is lower than any other president has scored in our poll at this stage of the presidency. And a year out from the 2018 midterms, the Democrats do have reason to be optimistic.
So far, and the people of Alabama have spoken. They have said
A stunning Democratic victory in a deep red state is the latest evidence that it may be time for Republicans to panic. Challenged by the president to vote for Roy Moore.
Get out and vote for Roy Moore.
Many Republicans stayed home. And in a state which elected Mr. Trump last year with 62% of the vote, just 48% of voters this year said they approved of the president.
They run, as a party of Trump and Moore. That's, like I said, that's not a winning combination in 2018.
Democrats see a wave of enthusiasm heading into 2018.
I think that the energy going into 2018 has already begun.
African-American voters were highly motivated on Tuesday, making up a higher share of the electorate than in 2012, the last time President Obama was on the ballot. Plus, the cultural revolution on the issue of sexual harassment and assault did not skip over Alabama, contributing to a 16-point advantage for Doug Jones with women, powered by 98% support among African-American women. And Alabama once again exposed the deep divisions between the Republican Party's establishment and populist wings.
I know we're supposed to cheer for our side of the aisle, if you will, but I'm really, really happy with what happened.
Republicans blame Roy Moore.
This was a rebuke of a candidate. We had a blemished candidate.
We had a flawed candidate.
Alabamans didn't want somebody who dated 14-year-old girls.
But despite Moore's obvious flaws, Democrats are sounding confident.
The Republican brand, even in deep red Alabama, is positively toxic.
One challenge for the party, many base voters are enthusiastic about impeachment, and Democrats risk overplaying their hand. You don't think impeachment should be the primary message of the Democratic Party in 2018?
No, I do not.
Democrats are defending 26 Senate seats next year, compared with just 8 for Republicans. 10 of those Democratic seats are in states Mr. Trump won, including 5 he carried by at least 18 points. But Democrats just won a Senate seat in a state he carried by 28 points. And the party is becoming extraordinarily confident about its chances in the House.
I think we're going to win the Senate and the House.
Joining me now is one of those red state.
And so, yeah, that was the NBC introduction and then video package. As you've noticed over the years, I'm sure Chuck Todd does this this live introduction to the news, and then he has a video package. And one of the disadvantages of that, I think, is that it makes it harder to fold in the breaking news. That's why this one and the ABC report coming up next have not so much about the Republican attacks on Robert Mueller, and also the breaking news about Mueller getting these emails from the Trump transition. You'll see that on CNN State of the Union, which often has the most up-to-date coverage. But I think that was generally good, and the impeachment coverage was good, which is, I think, not quite as clear in the ABC clip I'm about to show you, although I think the ABC coverage of the possible Democratic wave election coming up in 2018, which, that's what I'm hoping for. Well, there are a lot of signs of that, as you just saw in the NBC report, and it seemed almost impossible for the Democrats to take back the Senate because, there are 24 Democratic senators up for re-election in 2018 compared to 8 Republicans. So that's, 8 to 24, 3 to 1. And especially the way you saw kind of described in that NBC report, a lot of the Democrats are up in states that Trump won, and only 3 Republicans are up in states that Trump lost. So that makes it very hard for the Democrats to pick up enough seats. But if they can win a seat in Alabama, they can win one anywhere, basically. But that was a very flawed candidate. We'll see how that turns out. But anyway, here's pretty much the same facts covered by ABC in a similar way. But I wanted to sort of juxtapose the two, and especially juxtapose them against CNN and Fox News, which I'll show in a minute. But here's the George Stephanopoulos on This Week with George Stephanopoulos reporting on basically the same facts here.
For now, passing the tax plan, a political boost the Republicans need after their worst political loss of the year in Alabama. But will it look like a win 1 year from now?
This is where it all began.
This time last year, Donald Trump was thanking Alabama voters on his victory tour. Not this week. Despite the president's late push for the GOP candidate.
Get out and vote for Roy Moore. Do it. Do it.
Moore's baggage was just too heavy.
And the leader of the party, I would have liked to have had the seat.
And Trump's clout a little light. The president won Alabama by 28 points. Now his approval rating has dropped below 50 in the reddest of red states. And he's caught in the crossfire of a GOP civil war with his former strategist Steve Bannon.
To Mitch McConnell and Senator Shelby, there's a special place in hell for Republicans who should know better.
Waging an all-out assault on the Republican leaders in Congress who the president needs to work with every day. For Democrats, Tuesday, the best day of 2017.
We have come so far, and the people of Alabama have spoken.
Young people, African Americans, women energized by Trump and the Me Too movement made Doug Jones the first Democratic senator from Alabama in 25 years and gave Democrats hope that taking back the Senate just might be possible. But the midterm map favors Republicans. Democrats defending 24 seats, 10 from states that went to Trump last year. Only 8 Republican seats are up for re-election, and only Dean Heller of Nevada is running in a state won by Clinton. And the GOP is betting that their new tax bill is the insurance policy they need.
Jobs are going to come pouring back into this country, which we need very much.
Convinced that defeat on the tax bill would doom them in 2018, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, and the president have pulled out all the stops, claiming a promise kept to the middle class.
Everybody's going to benefit, but I think the greatest benefit is going to be for jobs and for the middle class.
But independent analysts showed the big winners from the bill are corporations and the wealthy. Polls show that less than a third of the country supports it, one of the most unpopular bills in years, which has Democrats hoping that the legislative defeat they expect this week will bring political victory come November.
I think they're in a lose-lose situation. If they don't pass the bill, they lose with their paymasters. If they do pass the bill, they lose with the American people.
Let's bring that to the number.
And that last topic, the tax bill, and whether it will actually end up winning votes or losing votes for Republicans in 2018 and beyond, that was definitely covered better in the ABC report than in the NBC report. That's something I'm going to talk about in the last 3 clips I'm going to show, specifically on the tax issue, because, you know, it's really important issue for it's basically a big giveaway to corporations and the wealthy, with some small benefits to other certain segments of the middle class, but then other people actually get tax hikes, and it's also this prelude to a big cut in Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which I'll talk about when I get to the Bernie Sanders clip at the end. But actually, a couple of the shows really focused on the tax bill and didn't talk about Alabama and also this ongoing fight between Robert Mueller's investigation and the Republicans, that it's sort of like a one-sided fight because there's very little coming from Robert Mueller. But Robert Mueller actually did release a statement this morning in response to claims that his investigation unlawfully got these Trump transition emails, and that was covered in the State of the Union from CNN State of the Union introduction from Jake Tapper, and I'm going to show you that here, and I'm actually going to run it all the way through this clip of Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, talking to Jake Tapper about whether Donald Trump is going to fire Robert Mueller, where he says, well, I haven't heard that, but of course it's within his power, which that's not all that comforting, but I'll talk about that with you after we watch that clip together here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is on edge to see how far the president is going to go. This morning, lawyers representing President Trump's transition team are accusing the special counsel of obtaining unauthorized access to tens of thousands of presidential transition emails. In a new letter to Congress, the transition lawyers claim such a move taints the investigation, and it comes as rumors are increasing that President Trump may be contemplating firing the special counsel, Bob Mueller. Late Saturday, a spokesman for the special counsel's office released a rare response saying, quote, when we have obtained emails in the course of our ongoing criminal investigation, we have secured either the account owner's consent or appropriate criminal process, unquote. As soon as this week, President Trump's lawyers are set to meet with the special counsel. The new developments have the potential to distract from the Republican focus this week, passing their $1.5 trillion tax cut and delivering President Trump his first major legislative victory of the year. Here with me to discuss that is Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Secretary Mnuchin, thank you so much, as always, for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
So we'll get to taxes in 1 second, but I do want to ask you about this lawyer sent to members of Congress from President Trump's attorneys for the transition, accusing Mueller of obtaining unauthorized access to tens of thousands of emails from the transition. The letter says the investigation is now, quote, tainted, and many legal experts suggest this could be a pretext setting the stage for the firing of Mueller. Would it alarm you if President Trump fired Mueller?
I haven't heard the president. I was at dinner last night with the president and vice president. I haven't heard anything about this, any firing. But we got to get past this investigation. It's a giant distraction. Nobody has said that in any way this impacted the outcome of the election.
But when you say you got to get past it, you think it should run its course?
I think it should be over quickly. Since I think there's nothing there, it should be over quickly, and people want to focus on other things.
But does that include the president firing Mueller when you say you want it over quickly, or should it be allowed to run its course?
I don't have any reason to think that the president is going to do that, but that's obviously up to him.
Let's turn to taxes.
So like I said, that was not a very comforting statement from Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. He hasn't heard any talk about firing Robert Mueller, but it's up to him. And there have been these rumors that Trump is going to fire Robert Mueller on December 22nd, this coming Friday, the Friday before Christmas. And there has been a lot of attacks on Robert Mueller, both from the special counsel investigating the president, both from the president and from Trump TV, as they're calling it on MSNBC, and I'm talking about Fox News, Sean Hannity, and even you'll see supposedly Chris Wallace and Fox News Sunday are straight news, and Chris Wallace is a straight news anchor over on Fox News. But you'll see Fox News Sunday, they really emphasize the tax bill, which actually CBS's Face the Nation did that as well. They didn't have a summary like ABC, NBC, and somewhat to some extent CNN did there on how Trump is in big trouble in Alabama and splitting the Republican Party, and this Democratic wave is coming. And then CNN did the best job there of covering the latest developments regarding the Robert Mueller investigation. Over in bizarro Fox News world, I'm going to show you 3 clips strung together. First from the introduction, the very beginning of the show, like the first minute of the show, after they did the whole tax bill thing, they talked about the Mueller investigation, but only in terms of the bias. There's this FBI agent who sent text messages to a lawyer also working on the investigation and said, things like, Trump is an idiot. And then there's this weird one about an insurance policy that I'll cover a little bit later. And it's actually, that will be in the in the third clip from the panel, which even includes the brown-haired guy who's not Steve Doocy, whose name is actually Brian Kilmeade, who's on Fox and Friends. Stephen Colbert on the Colbert Report used to call him the brown-haired guy who's not Steve Doocy, because Steve Doocy was the star. And you'll actually see later a clip of Peter Doocy, Steve Doocy's son, talking about the tax deal. But here is Chris Wallace in the introduction to Fox News Sunday, and then a little teaser he does saying, send us your questions about the bias in the Mueller investigation, and we may use it in our live panel. And then you'll see the live panels all about the bias in the Mueller investigation, not about any of the problems that Trump's having. And I'll talk about that with you after we watch that. This is 3 minutes and 33 seconds, 3 clips all strung together that I've edited together for you from Fox News Sunday this morning, showing how their coverage of what's going on with the Mueller investigation is all about bias in the Mueller investigation.
Then, Democrat Doug Jones wins in Alabama, putting even more pressure on the GOP to pass tax reform before he gets to the Senate.
It would be wrong for Senate Republicans to jam through this tax bill without giving the newly elected senator from Alabama the opportunity to cast his vote.
We'll sit down with the senator-elect in his first appearance on Fox News since the start of the campaign. Plus, lawmakers question whether political bias has taken over Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation.
How, with a straight face, can you say that this group of Democrat partisans are unbiased and will give President Trump a fair shake?
We recognize we have employees with political opinions, and it's our responsibility to make sure those opinions do not influence their actions.
We'll ask our Sunday panel about new documents the White House says show extreme bias against Mr. Trump. When we come back, the FBI under fire. The president launches tough new criticism of the agency. Plus, what would you like to ask the panel about allegations of political bias in the FBI? Just go to Facebook or Twitter at Fox News Sunday, and we may use your question on the air.
It's a shame what's happened with the FBI, but it is very sad when you look at those documents, and how they've done that is really, really disgraceful. And you have a lot of very angry people that are seeing it.
President Trump taking aim at the FBI after the release of anti-Trump text messages between two senior officials, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who were involved in the special counsel investigation until last July. And we're back now with the panel. Well, Bryant, the Washington Post had a story this weekend, I don't know if you saw it, that said that these texts back and forth between Strzok and Page were really an effort to cover up the fact that they were having an extramarital affair. And the question I have is, does that clear it all up for you?
Yes, thanks. We have some time left in the segment, so I'll fill it. No, absolutely not. You got to be kidding me. They were, the one thing that stood out on the text messages more than anything else was the fact is they were building in a plan just in case on August 15th, and I think you even referred to it earlier in the show. On August 15th, they were going back and forth on a text message. They talked about a plan just in case Donald Trump won, and he went on to say, just like having an insurance policy.
Well, let me put this up, and let's put it up on the screen if we can, guys. And this was a text that Peter Strzok sent to Lisa Page on August 15, 2016, and it says, I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office. We think Andy was Andrew McCabe, the #2 official in the FBI. The path you threw out in Andy's office, that there's no way Trump gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. Continue.
What I'm trying to say is, for any Republican who was worried or on the fence that there might have been some bias amongst the top level of the FBI when it comes to the investigation and against his candidacy, that is proof positive. Unless they're referring to Andy Griffith, who starred in Matlock, as well as his own black and white TV series, who had a lot of success. But I couldn't see those.
Proof positive of what?
Proof positive there was an anti-Trump bias at the top, and Peter Strzok is all around this investigation, enough to make you want to probe, and that's what Jim Jordan indicated that Bob Goodlatte is going to be doing when we get back from Christmas break.
Proof positive of anti-Trump bias at the top? I don't know. I mean, Robert Mueller's at the top, and he's a Republican. And, you know, I heard in one of the other panel discussions they were talking about how, well, of course, whenever there's an independent counsel, there's always claims of bias. And they brought up Kenneth Starr, the independent counsel who investigated Bill Clinton. But Ken Starr was also a Republican. Why is it that Republicans are the ones who investigate Democrats, but then also, to be fair, Republicans are the ones who investigate Republicans, and then even in that case, Robert Mueller, a Republican appointee, is not good enough for the Republicans to not attack him. But anyway, that was the last news summary, or that was kind of a lack of news summary from Fox News on any of the problems Trump's having. And like I said, CBS's Face the Nation was kind of the same. One thing you may have noticed was missing from all those news summaries of what happened this week is something I noticed in the live comments. One of my live viewers, Caged, asked about over here. No, as you probably wouldn't be surprised, on the Big Five corporate outlets, there was no discussion of net neutrality on their Sunday morning, their flagship Sunday morning shows. I actually watched AM Joy on MSNBC, which is part of NBC, owned by Comcast, a big opponent of net neutrality. And on AM Joy, they had one of the pro-net neutrality FCC commissioners on and did a whole segment on it. And I thought about talking about net neutrality, but I'm pretty much governed by the clips on the Sunday morning news analysis shows, and I have my topics pretty much delineated by that this morning. And it is an important topic, although it's not dead yet. There are lawsuits involved, and a changeover in Congress could make a difference, and so there are all sorts of ways that it might not be over yet. But thanks for that comment from Cage, and I saw some other people were asking about that. No discussion of net neutrality on the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, at least their big flagship shows that I take my, their Sunday morning news analysis shows that I take my clips from. But I want to finish up the last 4 clips from newsmakers. First, the White House Legislative Affairs Director Marc Short was on a couple programs. This is a clip of him from Meet the Press. Also, not really ruling out Donald Trump firing Robert Mueller. He also deals with this accusation about Robert Mueller unlawfully getting these Trump transition emails, which apparently aren't even don't have any. You're not in the. If you read the small print from the Government Services Administration, when they give the transition team these emails to use, they tell them that there's not an expectation of privacy from government investigations. So anyway, you saw that come up in the news summary from CNN, and here's Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press asking the White House Legislative Affairs Director Marc Short about it, and he basically says the same thing you heard earlier from Steve Mnuchin, that I haven't heard conversations about that, but it's still not that comforting over here.
Let me ask you about the news overnight. I know that there is a lawyer for the Trump transition, Trump for America, that says that Bob Mueller's investigation got the transition emails. PTT.gov is how all those email addresses end. Got those government-issued or government-used emails unlawfully. Mueller's office says that's not true. A statement this morning: we have obtained emails in the course of our ongoing criminal investigation. We have secured either the account owner's consent or appropriate criminal process, implying perhaps that there was a subpoena to GSA. Do you believe these were unlawfully gotten?
Chuck, thankfully I'm not in communication with a transition lawyer for the Trump team. The reality is that this administration has complied in every single possible way with the special counsel. Taxpayers have spent millions and millions of dollars in this investigation that has not yet proven any sense of collusion with the Russians. I think the American people are ready to turn the page.
Okay, but is the president going to continue to cooperate, or is he setting the stage for firing Bob Mueller?
No, there's no conversation.
There's no way he's going to fire him.
There's no conversation about that whatsoever in the White House, Chuck.
None whatsoever.
You guys keep bringing that up. We have continued to cooperate in every single possible way with that investigation.
Okay. Marc Short, I will leave it there. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, sharing your views.
Chuck, thanks for having me.
So, no conversations about firing Mueller, but also that wasn't completely reassuring that Mueller wouldn't be fired next Friday. I guess by the time I'm back next Sunday on December 24th with my next Sunday live clip roundup, we'll know whether Donald Trump fired Robert Mueller on December 22nd. The next clip I want to show is another Republican version of this attack on Robert Mueller that may be leading up to some sort of actual action firing Robert Mueller. Actual action. This is Oklahoma Senator James Lankford over on CBS's Face the Nation, where John Dickerson, you'll see, asks about the struck insurance policy email, which I don't quite understand what they're talking about. And you'll see he says a lot of the same things you heard the brown-haired guy who's not Steve Doocy say in that Fox News clip I showed earlier, that it shows that there's bias at the top, and it may not taint the entire investigation, but it taints at least that season. He uses the word season. They were fired last July. I don't know, was there something bad that happened last summer that they want to pretend is too biased to be believable, or I don't know what that's referring to, but you can let me know what you think after we watch that clip together. 97 seconds from CBS's Face of the Nation this morning over here.
About the texts that were released this week from an investigator on the Mueller team. What's your opinion about those texts, one of which referred to an insurance policy? There's a lot of debate about that text and what exactly was meant by it. But how serious do you think this is in the context of the larger investigation that you know something about?
I think it's serious anytime you have an investigator within an investigation that has an obvious political bias, whichever direction that goes. It's clear this individual within the Mueller team that was also on the Clinton email investigation team on the FBI in their leadership had a strong bias against now President Trump when he was candidate Trump, and was very clear about that. When that was discovered by the Mueller team, they fired him, appropriately so, and took him off of that team. But that is a big consideration. We expect the Justice Department to be blind and be fair to all sides, not have a clear political bias and express it so strongly.
But given that Mueller took him off the investigation, do you think this taints the larger project he's doing, since you know the scope of that larger project?
Yeah, it's very serious to be able to have someone inside. What they've got to determine is, was he directing the investigation one way or the other while he was on the investigation? Is that something they can go back and repair and look and see if there's any kind of bias that's in it? Obviously, I don't think it taints the entire process, but it certainly taints that season of it, and it's something you should look at with any political investigation that he was on at the time. Again, we want our FBI agents to be neutral and to be non-political, not very actively engaged politically.
All right, Senator Lankford, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So when Senator Lankford says that this taints the season, I set that up for you before I showed the clip. I don't know exactly what that means, if there's some deeper implication that Peter struck the FBI agent and his illicit girlfriend, who was a lawyer in the investigation. They were fired last July, so did something happen last summer that was, I don't know. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I've been reading the live comments along the way, and I have 2 more clips on this Trump dooming the Republican Party. First, a clip from the result of Trump's I guess, negative spell on the election over in Alabama, along with Roy Moore's problem being an accused pedophile, all led to a Democrat being elected from Alabama. And some people say that since Doug Jones has to be reelected in 3 years, that he's going to basically turn into a Republican, that he may actually have to change parties. That's what happened to the last Republican who was elected, Howell Heflin, who I remember and was apparently like a mentor of Doug Jones. I remember Howell Heflin being on the Sunday morning news analysis shows when I used to watch them in like the late 80s and early 90s. And anyway, here you'll see Doug Jones sounding very much like a Democrat in terms of how he's going to vote. But then I edited it together with a clip about whether he thinks Trump should resign. And he is saying basically, well, all these based on the women accusing him, and this is actually from CNN's State of the Union, where Jake Tapper brings up what happened with Al Franken. Should Donald Trump resign? You saw in the Weekend Update Saturday Night Live clip that 9 Democratic senators have called for Trump to resign, but Doug Jones is not going to be one of them, and I think that is sort of a result of being elected from Alabama, even if the first half of the 2 clips I've edited together here don't really show any difference in how he'll vote. How he reacts to things like the sexual harassment allegations against Donald Trump, I think does put him on the far right side of the Democratic Party, along with Joe Manchin from West Virginia, as I'll discuss with you after we watch these 2 CNN State of the Union clips edited together from the interview with Doug Jones by Jake Tapper this morning over here.
Republican Senator Cory Gardner, who's the chairman of the Senate Republican campaign arm, the NRSC, and purposely decidedly did not endorse Roy Moore. Cory Gardner was adamantly opposed to Roy Moore. In fact, he refused to help fund his campaign. But take a look at the statement he released after your victory. Quote, "I hope Senator-elect Doug Jones will do the right thing and truly represent Alabama by choosing to vote with the Senate Republican majority. Now, I know that you're going to vote according to what you think is right, but Alabama is a deeply red state. It went for President Trump by 28 points. Your reelection is just in 3 years. In order to truly represent your state, do you need to consider voting with Republicans on some issues?
Of course I do. I mean, look, Jake, one of the problems in American politics right now, in my opinion, is that everybody thinks because you're a member of one party or another, you're going to vote a certain way. And that should not be the case, shouldn't ever be the case. I'm going to talk to people on both sides of the aisle, try to figure out what I think is in the best interest of my state and in the country. Now, I don't expect me to vote solidly for Republicans or Democrats. I came up with Senator Howell Heflin from Alabama many years ago. He did always said to do the things that he thought was in the best interest of his constituents, which is in the state of Alabama. I don't think anybody should depend on be able to count on my vote for anything. They got to make sure that I'm looking at it, studying it, and I'm going to study all sides.
Is there an issue or two that you could point to where you think you might vote with the Republicans? I mean, just looking at your position papers, you seem like a Democrat. I don't really see any areas where you might vote with the Republicans.
Well, sure. I mean, look, I think you're going to see an infrastructure bill coming up next year. That's going to be, I think, very important to the people of the state of Alabama. I'm going to try to look at that. I think there's any number of things that you can do. You know, but these big issues, the problem we've got right now is we're looking at these giant issues, a 500-page tax bill that just landed on somebody's desk the other day that nobody really knows all that's in there. The health care bills were the same way. I think there's any number of issues that come up on a daily basis or a weekly basis that we can find common ground on. But that's the main thing, is that a bill or an issue may start out one way, but trying to work with both sides, with both parties, I think is going to be the way to go to try to get things done.
Al Franken's resignation, some of your Democratic colleagues have been calling for President Trump to resign because of the allegations against him, including Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, who recently campaigned for you in Alabama. Take a listen to Senator Booker.
Clearly, if we have a standard in which Al Franken is resigning, the president has had multiple more women come with a very clear fact pattern, and he should do the right thing and resign.
Do you agree with Senator Booker that President Trump should resign because of these allegations?
You know, Jake, where I am on that right now is that those allegations were made before the election. And so people had an opportunity to judge before that election. I think we need to move on and not get distracted by those issues. Let's get on with the real issues that are facing people of this country right now. And I don't think that the president ought to resign at this point. We'll see how things go. But certainly those allegations are not new. And he was elected with those allegations at front and center.
I guess the question is, why should Al Franken resign if there are even more horrific allegations about President Trump, and no one is calling for him to step down?
Well, again, I go back to the fact that those allegations were made, and he was elected President of the United States. And I think the American people spoke on that at this time. There's other things out there, but I think at this point we need to move on and try to work with some real issues that are facing the country and not worry about getting at odds with the president any more than we have to.
Senator-elect Doug Jones, congratulations.
I'm not sure that that is actually the correct standard, that once someone's been elected by the voters, any allegations that were known at the time of the election are no longer worth investigating or using in an ethics investigation, or using for an ethics charge to expel someone. Like if Roy Moore had been elected, what Doug Jones is saying is the Senate shouldn't have expelled him. I don't know, because people, when they're voting, they're not necessarily voting on criminal allegations. A lot of people vote just on the party line, or because they want to put, someone in the Senate or the Congress who will, they want a Supreme Court justice who is pro-life. Abortion was the big issue that stopped people from voting for Doug Jones in Alabama, because he was going to kill unborn babies, or vote for a Supreme Court justice who would continue to make it legal to kill unborn babies from the anti-abortion point of view. And of course I believe in a woman's right to choose, and that is apparently what Doug Jones believes in, and I don't think in the first half of that last clip that you saw much in the way of how he would vote differently than other Democrats, but in the last half he definitely seemed on the far right side on sort of like social issues, or on, I don't agree with his analysis of whether the voters decide and then sexual harassment charges no longer are important. And it's not a great thing to have a Democratic senator taking that position. And before I leave the topic of how Trump is dooming the Republicans and get to a few clips on the tax issue, and in between I will have a bonus Sandy clip. But first I want to show you a 2-minute, 10-second clip from NBC's Meet the Press. This is the data download segment. They got rid of the old music that sounded like some sort of kind of, what was it, the battle music? I can't even remember the name of that Nintendo game, but the music's a little different. But this is actually about why there's going to be a wave election next year, or the details showing that it's looking more and more possible. You saw the 11-point, like the 11-point difference between Democrats and Republicans on the generic ballot. Well, the big problem for Republicans is the more moderate Republicans in the suburbs are just fleeing the Republican Party, and Donald Trump specifically, and in huge numbers. And that's what you see in this data download segment, the final segment in this topic, before I get to the bonus Sandy clip and the Republican tax bill that's probably going to pass this week. Here's some very interesting polling data if you're looking for a Democratic wave next year that I'll talk about with you after we watch together here.
Time. Republicans are very quick to point out Roy Moore's many flaws as a candidate and want to call his loss in Alabama simply an outlier. But Alabama is another example of a bigger issue for the GOP, a retreat from the suburbs. Let me explain. In the 5 counties where the most votes were cast, places with the big suburban populations, Republican Roy Moore took a beating. He lost these counties in total by 24 percentage points. Compare that to how Republican Senator Richard Shelby did in his race a year earlier. He won those same counties by 9 percentage points. Of course, he had the advantage of incumbency, and it was a presidential turnout. Still a striking swing. In 2017, you could see the beginnings of this suburban tide rolling in off-year races across the country. This was apparent in the governor's races last month in New Jersey and Virginia. In New Jersey, the top 5 counties gave Democrat Phil Murphy an 11-point edge. The same counties went Republican for Chris Christie by 23 points 4 years earlier. In Virginia, the advantage was 23 points for the Democrat Ralph Northam. In 2013, those same counties gave the Democrat only a 10-point edge. Even in places where Republicans won special elections in 2017, there were signs of suburban erosion. In that infamous Georgia 6 special, suburban Atlanta, Republican Karen Handel eked out a 4-point win. But in November 2016, the Republican margin for that suburban House seat was 23 points. Similar story in the Kansas 4th District, which includes the suburbs around Wichita. Republican Ron Estes won his special election by 6 points. The year before, the seat went Republican by a whopping 31 points. But what else do these places have in common? The data show nearly all of these suburban communities also had trouble supporting President Trump in 2016. He did far worse than average Republicans in most of these same counties. If this problem in the suburbs persists for the GOP, it's going to be difficult for the party to hang on to seats all across levels of government, whether we're talking in places around Phoenix, Nashville, Dallas, you name the urban community. When we come back, the latest on the Russia invasion.
So, wow, that is definitely pointing towards a Democratic wave. You know, a lot of people were complaining that in all these special elections to fill seats left open by Trump appointees, that Democrats weren't winning. You know, they kept saying, oh, we're doing better than ever, but they weren't doing well enough to win the seats, including that Georgia John Ossoff race that was really disappointing for a lot of Democrats. But what that data download from NBC shows you is that Democrats were losing by much smaller numbers than you would expect, and it's paid off in the Virginia election. You saw the governor and state representatives elections in Virginia, and now this Alabama seat that had something to do with Roy Moore and the allegations against him, but also showed how weak Trump and the Republicans are. So I'm really happy about that, and I appreciate those of you who have expressed your opinions while I've been watching this. I also saw I got my first Super Chat contribution from the live viewers. This is from Daniil Dmitriev, if I'm pronouncing that first name correctly. I don't know if you can see that. It was a thank you for my hard work, as long as there's net neutrality that allows me to broadcast. I don't know how the end of net neutrality would affect my broadcast, but hopefully we're a long way from these new rules actually affecting things in ways that you can perceive. And like I said, there are these lawsuits that are coming, and but anyway, I wish I could talk more about net neutrality, but I want to move on to the tax topic. But before I do, I did promise that I would have a short Sandy clip for the Sandy fans out there in between the topics. I like to put the bonus Sandy clip. So Sandy seemed to be in quite a hurry. She's right over there, lying down, and she was in quite a hurry to lie down, and I think she was very excited by the topic, since I was talking about how Trump was dooming the Republicans and there might be a Democratic wave coming next year. I think this got Sandy really excited to get ready for the show, as you can see in the 8-second clip of Sandy lying down over here. Trust me, that is lightning speed for Sandy, who is not the speediest animal you have ever seen in your life. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the bonus Sandy clip for the Sandy fans out there. And now I have the last 3 clips I promised you on the tax issue. First, I want to show how Fox News Sunday, this was their main topic. They started off the show talking about taxes, and they actually had a fairly good summary, I thought, of at least the most positive aspects of the tax bill. I think it was definitely spun in the direction of the Trump administration. First, there's an introduction from Chris Wallace, which is slightly more balanced, I think, than the report from the blonde-haired guy who's not Steve Doocy. No, this is Peter Doocy, the son of Steve Doocy, which is, I guess, shows you that sequels are often even worse than the bad movies on which they're based. I don't know. You can let me know what you think after we watch that clip together over here.
Hello again from Fox News in Washington. Republicans appear ready this week to pass the most sweeping overhaul of the tax code in 3 decades. Opposition among GOP holdouts has melted away, and party leaders in Congress are looking to hand President Trump his first major legislative victory. In a few minutes, we'll discuss what the plan means for American families and businesses with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. But first, to correspondent Peter Doocy live on Capitol Hill with a preview of both the tax vote and the effort to avoid a government shutdown before Christmas. Peter.
Good morning, Chris. The next movement on this tax bill comes Tuesday, when House lawmakers hope to pass the bill and send it to the Senate, where the math gets a little tougher. The count there is expected to be so close that the Vice President Mike Pence has delayed a long-planned trip to the Middle East just to be available to cast a tie-breaking vote if necessary. But President Trump is confident that it gets done by the end of this week.
We have a tremendous spirit for the tax reform. This is going to be one of the great Christmas gifts to middle-income people.
There are still 7 tax brackets under the new plan, but the rates are lower until 2025. The new top rate for top earners drops from 39.6% to 37%. The child tax credit doubles to $2,000 per child, and the standard deduction nearly doubles as well to $12,000 for single filers, which means that fewer people are expected to itemize their deductions. There is a new $10,000 cap on deductions for state and local taxes. The mortgage interest deduction will be capped at $750,000, and Obamacare's fine for people who don't want insurance under the individual mandate disappears. So The first half of this week, Republicans will try to transform the tax code, and the second half of the week, they are going to have to try to keep the government funded. There will be a government shutdown next weekend if they can't figure out how to do that by Friday night. Chris?
Peter, do.
Oh, and at least Fox News did cover the government shutdown. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. I wonder if that will happen at the same time that Donald Trump fires Robert Mueller. I don't think Trump's going to fire Robert Mueller next Friday, but that's what people are worried about. And I thought that explanation of the good points of the tax bill, where it was a reasonable high school book report from the son of Steve Doocy, Peter Doocy there, and I think he covered what his dad would want him to say. I think he may graduate up into Fox and Friends one of these days, but if you want to see some of the broken promises, Trump's promises to his working class base that didn't make it into this tax bill, you can see it on NBC's Meet the Press, not in a news summary, but in the way the host Chuck Todd cross-examined the White House Legislative Affairs Director Marc Short, first showing a whole bunch of clips of Donald Trump promising things that are not in this tax bill, where he basically screwed his working class, white working class voters in the Rust Belt that won him the election, apparently. And then you'll see some good follow-up also from Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. You can tell me if you think Marc Short does a reasonable job of defending the indefensible, as I will discuss with you after we watch this second to last clip from the show tonight, before I get to the final Bernie Sanders clip, the Bernie Sanders critique of the tax bill. But here is Marc Short from the White House trying to defend it against a very good cross-examination from Chuck Todd this morning, almost 4 minutes long over here.
Welcome back. Republicans are hoping to pass their tax cut bill this week and give President Trump a chance to sign the bill into law before Christmas. The bill does this. It lowers the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. It lowers the top individual rate from 39.6% to 37%. And as an added bonus to those at the top, it raises the income level where that rate kicks in. But the bill also nearly doubles the standard deductions for taxpayers who do not itemize, potentially a big help for lower and moderate income households, and it doubles the child tax credit. Also, there were a number of changes in the final days that restored or expanded popular deductions, like those for student loans and for medical expenses. Still, some economists say this bill is heavily tilted in favor of the wealthy, and most Americans seem to agree with that assessment. 65% said that, according to a Quinnipiac poll out this week, and that perception could become a big challenge for the Republicans in 2018. Joining me now is the White House Director of Legislative Affairs, Marc Short. Mr. Short, welcome back to the show, sir.
Chuck, thanks for having me back.
I'm going to play for you a list of promises the president made when it came to taxes and discuss them with you after you hear it. Here it is.
At the center of our plan is massive tax relief for the American middle class.
We're going to have 3 brackets instead of 7. We're doing a major simplification.
And we're going to make it nice and simple. And we're getting rid of carried interest.
All of this does not add to our debt or our deficit. In other words, it's going to cost me a fortune.
All right. None of those things are true right now. And we can debate the middle class aspect in a minute. I know that is that I concede, but we're still at 7 brackets. No more tax simplification. We still have the carried interest issue, which is something he vowed to get rid of multiple times as a candidate. And by the way, he does personally benefit from every analysis on this, and there is a hit on the debt. What do you say to those broken promises that the candidate Donald Trump made on taxes?
Chuck, there are many deliveries here in the bill that the president made promises on. One, it does simplify the tax code. Some of the things you're not talking about is it eliminates oil and gas production credits. It also eliminates many deductions that families and businesses were taking, such as specifically lobbying expenses. It's helping to drain the swamp. There are promises he made, he delivered on. There's certain industries here that made it impossible for us to deliver on every single one of those. But keep in mind what's most important, Chuck. We lowered the corporate rate from 35% to 21% to bring jobs back to our country. That was a signature accomplishment in this bill, a 40% reduction. He is lowering and delivering middle-income tax relief to families across the country. For an average single mom earning $40,000 a year with 2 children, she gets a $1,400 tax benefit. For the average family of 4 earning $70,000 a year, they get a $2,000 tax benefit. He delivered on his promise to focus on middle-income families as well as to provide corporate tax relief. The simplification, there's several elements we did simplify. We didn't get as much as we want. It's part of the compromise here, what you have to work with.
Okay, it was interesting to me that you led with, you think the singular accomplishment here is on the corporate side of things. You made that permanent. The middle-class relief that you described is not permanent. And in fact, in order to stay within the rules, it keeps creeping up when they expire. And I know you believe that a future Congress won't have the guts to let it expire. But that's, why subject individual Americans to that cliff and not corporate America?
It's a fair question, Chuck, but here's the reality is that we would love to have the individual side permanent too. The reality is that corporations need to make investments years in advance to know what's going to happen as opposed to numbers continuing to gyrate. So you're giving them assurances as to where we're going to be 10 years out so they can make long-term investments in our country. The budget reconciliation rules in the Senate are somewhat arcane and make it difficult to do both. If we could get the individual side permanent, we would love to do that also, and we'll continue to work to try to do so.
Is it possible that Joe Manchin is right? And if you...
So, like I said, I don't really buy the defense from Marc Short there, but I thought Chuck Todd did a fairly good job of cross-examining him. And you notice he said that there's the argument that even though the tax cuts for the middle class are basically all the tax cuts for individuals expire in like 5 years so that they could keep the hit to the deficit to only $1.5 trillion, but the corporate tax cuts are permanent, so that is a huge giveaway to these big rich corporations. Well, why are they the priority and not the middle class and the individual taxpayers? And I didn't think that the answer was really that persuasive, but at least you heard Chuck Todd say, you know, that the argument is future Congresses won't have the guts to let those expire. But in this next final clip, which is John Dickerson from CBS's Face the Nation talking to Bernie Sanders, I think Bernie Sanders does the best job of critiquing the Republican tax cut. And you'll hear in John Dickerson's follow-up, he actually says that that a future Congress, they won't have the guts, or they won't he says the argument is they won't be able to vote to let these tax cuts expire. But that's backwards, because they're not going to let the tax cuts expire, or it's not by voting, it's if they do nothing, they expire. And given how hard it is to get a vote through Congress, that's a really important mistake John Dickerson makes during this really good critique of the tax plan from independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who caucuses with the Democrats, in the final clip for tonight over here.
This looks like it's going to get passed through the Senate and the House and signed by the president, this tax cut bill. Is there anything more that opponents like you could have done to stop this?
Well, I think we did everything that we could. But at the end of the day, what you had is people like Mr. Mnuchin, who himself is worth $300 or $400 million. The President of the United States, who is worth several billion dollars. As you mentioned, some 4,000 or 5,000 lobbyists doing everything that they could to write a bill which significantly benefits the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations. The latest analysis that we have seen suggests that 72% of the benefits go to the top 5%. My guess is that 60% of the benefits will go to the top 1%. And at the end of the decade, because the benefits for the middle class are temporary, while the corporate benefits are permanent, at the end of the decade, over half of the middle class will be paying more in taxes. What we are seeing here is a real massive attack on the middle class. And what I worry very much, John, is that if you listen to what the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, is talking about, what he is saying is that as a result of this bill, the deficit will go up by $1.4 trillion. And what Ryan, in my view, will come back with are massive cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid in order to offset that deficit.
Let me add.
So massive tax breaks for the rich, cuts to Social Security. This is a grossly unfair tax bill.
I want to get to the entitlements in just a moment, but on that question of the middle class, what the administration says and Republicans say is that, yes, those tax cuts expire for the middle class, but knowing politics as they do, that nobody's going to vote to let them expire, that those will essentially be kept. That seems pretty reasonable in the way Washington works. So is it really fair to say they're going to expire? Go ahead.
Well, they are. I mean, the way this bill is written is the tax breaks for corporations are now permanent. Why weren't the tax breaks for the middle class made permanent? Because it has to do with the priorities of the folks who wrote that legislation. And their job is to represent multinational corporations and not working families. That's where we are today.
Let me ask you, there's a lot of talk.
So, of course, Bernie Sanders is right, or at least in my opinion. And as I said before I showed that clip, I think John Dickerson totally misframed his follow-up there. But, you know, that it's reasonable the way Washington works to say that Congress isn't going to vote to let these expire. But the point is they'd have to vote to stop them from expiring and to get stuff passed through Congress, knowing how Washington works. It's not reasonable to think that that might not pass Congress. And the middle-class tax cuts will expire while the big corporate tax cuts will remain permanent in perpetuity. And anyway, that's the last clip. Like I said, if you enjoyed the 13 clips I picked out for you, please give me a thumbs up down there. Give me a supportive comment in the comment section. I also appreciate the super chat contribution I got during the show, and I especially support my monthly patrons. If you look right up here, you'll see a new sticker I got, a hashtag LiberalViewer sticker. That's the proof I just got, and I'm about to order a bunch of those starting in 2018. I will be giving those out to my patrons on Patreon who support me with $5 a month. And then for $10 a month, I will also add in an ACLU Constitution that has the whole Constitution in here, plus the history of the ACLU briefly, and then an ACLU Know Your Rights section at the end. And I'm also willing, I'm even willing to inscribe a little message in here, think like maybe 280 characters long or less, your favorite part of the Constitution. I'll inscribe that for you, and I will send it to your shipping address, or as another alternative, I will also send it to President Donald J. Trump at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., so that he gets his copy of the ACLU Constitution. So those will be, that'll be for $10 a month contributors to my Patreon account, my Patreon patrons. By the way, I noticed Patreon rescinded their new fees in the last week, so people who are upset about that, that's not happening anymore. The new patron fees are gone, that hurt the small patrons. So if you want to contribute that way, starting in January 2018, I will have new rewards, and I hope you appreciate the time I put into this every Sunday. I will be back next Sunday, December 24th, and the Sunday after that, December 31st, putting together these live clip roundups. Hopefully, none of those shows will be about the firing of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, but I guess that remains to be seen. But until next week, or until I have some reason to put up an edited, produced video, I guess that's my show for tonight, and I will be seeing all of you around the internet.